Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's meeting for the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. My name is Cviat Kushirov, and I'm a director with this Rotary Club. At the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley, every week we try to bring you engaging speakers that cover topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, education, and humanitarian service. This week will be no different. We have a very exciting speaker lined up for you, all the way from a different continent. So who we have on the line here today is Kelly Sibisibi, and Kelly will be telling us about, actually, let me just switch to gallery view over here so you can see her as well. There's Kelly. So she will be telling us about malaria eradication efforts in Southern Africa, which is the main work that she's involved with. She will also tell us a little bit about herself. I met Kelly about a year and a half, 2 years ago or so. Funny story, we met on a flight over to South Africa. So we got to chat and we've been friends since then. So I'm sure she has some interesting things to share with us today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelly.
All right, thanks for the introduction. Maybe just to correct there that it's not eradication, it's elimination. The definitions according to WHO are very different. So the initiative is to eliminate malaria, as you correctly said. Maybe just a bit of background on who I am. Kelly Sibisibi. I come from Botswana. Lived there all my life and studied partly in South Africa for my university education. But really passion for development economic and social economic really came up much earlier in my life when I was in high school. And then I went on to pursue a degree in financial economics. So it's slightly different from what I'm doing right now because I'm in public health. But it's driven right now, honestly, just by passion, because I worked in corporate when I started my career. So this, like I say, is just something that I genuinely love, to be able to impact the lives of people. So I work for a Malaria Elimination Secretariat, and we literally are in the business of eliminating malaria in Southern Africa specifically. And this came from a serious need to address elimination because of the millions of lives that are lost to this disease annually. So we mobilized the Southern Africa Development Community, mobilized 2009, and said to ministers of health, we need to come up with a solution to this. At the time, really, the focus was a lot on HIV and TB. So, that received a lot of attention, and not so much malaria, but we saw the numbers really drastically going up, and it was, let's address this and let's do something about it. So the Secretariat was developed, came about 2015. So it's just over 2 years old now, and I've been with the organization since mid-2016. So a lot of my work really is around advocacy and lobbying. Which I've enjoyed a lot, because, like I say, it's very different from what I studied. But being an economist by profession or by study, this certainly intrigued me a lot to be part of. So So what's been exciting really in Southern Africa is that the African agenda, or of the African Union, the AU, is really to have eliminated malaria by 2030. So initially countries were doing this individually, but then it came to light that we really need to do this on a regional platform, coordinate efforts between countries, so that at least there's synergy in how countries implement their programs towards elimination. It's one thing for one country to try and eliminate it by itself, but it's another when you're experiencing cases of importation from another country. And you're really not having that conversation with each other to say, how best can we team up? So really what we are then, mandated to do is have those conversations, facilitate those conversations. So from a policy harmonization perspective, we've really had to try beef up and encourage those conversations to happen. So yeah, and what's been really good is we've had a lot of support, from, for example, Bill Gates, the Melinda Gates Foundation have been very instrumental in the work that we're doing, as well as UCSF. They've also been so supportive of our efforts, but also not forgetting, I think one of our biggest donors right now is the Global Fund, who have really also again supported these efforts in Southern Africa. So yeah, that's a bit on what I do.
That's awesome. Hey, so you mentioned so the main support comes from the Gates Foundation, from the Global Fund, and UCSS. What is UCSS?
UCSF, University of, what is it, California? What is it? UCSF, California, San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yes. Yeah, actually they're funded by Gates, and they give us some of their funding. They share it with us.
That's kind of cool. So there's a link to Silicon Valley right there.
Oh, right. Actually, yes.
Hey, so this is very cool. Let me ask you this: how did you mentioned you're an economist by profession? So where did you complete your training? Where did you go to school? And how did you land in this type of work? Like, what was the process for you personally?
Sure. So I studied South Africa, like I said, for university, specifically at Rhodes University. And I think most of my studies, although I graduated with a degree in financial economics, the passion personally was really around working for a development agency. So although I started my career in corporate, I worked back in Botswana in a diamond company. I felt I learned what I needed. I learned the trade, and which was amazing for that time. But I felt it wasn't fulfilling my personal purpose, right? Because I'm just of the opinion that my personal purpose in this world is to give back and to give back to others. So when I then started looking around, I was like, I need to find something now that is more aligned to my own passion. And that's how I stumbled onto this amazing organization where I work today.
Yeah, very cool. Well,
Yeah.
hey, so I wanted to actually, so I was thinking through this. I think it might be good to take a step back and talk about malaria. Like, what is malaria? So I know a little bit about it, but it would be good to hear from you. Kind of as an introduction to maybe some of our members who might be less familiar. So, what is malaria? How do you get it? Why is it important to eliminate it?
Okay, I'm not sure how to structure that properly, but
so like maybe talk about how do you so where is malaria mostly an issue? How does one get sick with malaria, and what is normally the result? Like, why is it dangerous? And how, like, what are some of the different types of efforts in place to stop the spread of malaria?
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm mumbling a little bit here because I want to say that it's I guess because I just assume everybody knows what malaria is. Although to be honest, I also learned more as I joined the organization. I mean, somewhere I knew that there's malaria and it exists, but how you contract it, I wasn't really sure. Nor did I really understand the fact that you can actually die from malaria. I thought it was just something that's treatable. So it's transmitted by the female mosquito, interestingly, and not the male mosquitoes. It's basically the carrier, like I said, is a female anopheles, it's called, the female mosquito. And what studies have shown that it comes around mostly when it's been raining, because it's really attracted to bodies of water, especially like still bodies of water that don't move. So these are sort of the areas where you'd find it. So you wouldn't find it typically in a very developed city. You find it somewhere maybe where, you know, there's large bodies of water, like a river, close to settlement where people settle. And we found that, especially in poor communities where people, you know, normally sit outside, make food outside, they're more likely to get it, or even inside their homes, where at night, if they don't sleep under a net, you know, it's most likely to occur in that setting. But also just the transportation of human to human. So it bites somebody close to you, and then you transport, you are the carrier of malaria as the person. So you're the host, if I can put it that way, of the disease.
So then if a mosquito bites you, and then you have malaria, then it has malaria in the blood that it's taken from you, and when it goes and bites someone else, like in the same room or in close proximity, then
right.
they also could get it.
Right, exactly. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but I was just going to say that what we found is that, so one country will do exceptionally well at you know, controlling it, but unfortunately their neighboring country not so much. And because of, let's say, they're brought for commerce reasons, they just jump across, and they're the carriers of it, where they come from a very high density where malaria might be, and they carry it across to that country. So that's really what, for example, we're trying to address, is cross-border transportation of the disease.
So how do you address that? Like, is there a certain type of test that could be done as someone crosses a border? Or I mean, I imagine that's a pretty big challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, I mean, you can't really control the movement of people, but you can certainly try and provide facilities for people who otherwise may have to walk like a 30 kilometer, or the next clinic, or whichever is within like a 30, 50 kilometer radius to where they live, and try and bring those facilities as close as possible to them, engage communities to also be part of those efforts. So we're rolling out clinics along border posts. And these clinics are really meant to target source of where, you know, we find the malaria to be like hotspot areas where malaria cases are really high and incidence rates are really high. Also, what countries do very well, if you arrive in an airport, you might notice they'll just, you know, tell you a few precautionary methods you should take. So either before you travel to a malarious area, take your antimalarials at least 2 weeks before, sleep under a net if you can. But I think it just really depends on where you're going. So we've seen a lot of countries really beefing those efforts up to really be, you know, like on the education side, let people know that this is a malarious area.
Okay, and so the best way to address it then is through, or to prevent it is through, if you're traveling to any of those places that malaria is prevalent, is to take malaria pills and then sleep under a bed net. Yeah,
exactly. It is a treatable disease. Luckily, it is something that's treatable, and it's preventable as well. So it's just dependent on people really just taking that precaution. And unfortunately, I mean, malaria can present itself just like a normal fever. You go to the doctor, they may not immediately pick it up as malaria is the first thing, so they may diagnose it as a fever. You know, you're just coming down with a regular fever. So it's just about the initiative people take also themselves, as much as, you know, practitioners can only do so much. So yeah.
Do you know any statistics on, like, you know, the numbers of people maybe that are affected by malaria, and is it the countries where you focus your efforts on in Southern Africa, are those the ones most affected by malaria around the world? Do you know?
Okay, I'm going to say I can't answer that directly, just because just between you and I, you obviously need to just be cautious about how much you can say about specific countries, or
and that's okay.
Yeah. So I'll just clarify and just say, basically the initiative is malaria is identified as a problem in Africa. So let's try, and then the thinking really was that let's try break it up into regions, because realize that no one country can do this alone, right? So I can mention that, I can say Sri Lanka, for example, they've done exceptionally well, and they were given elimination status in 2016 by WHO. And they are almost in isolation, but admit to say, look, cases were coming in from different countries. So whereas in Africa, it was, because we can't seem to achieve this in isolation, let's rather do this and try and do it in regional blocks instead. Of
And
saying.
sorry, and is this kind of a more recent development in the thinking about that? Is that a new approach?
No. So it's been done in your Asia Pacific areas, and that's really where the modeling for Africa also came from. Is it seems to be succeeding and doing really well in Asian countries. So let's also try and model it and move away from working in silos and really now try a more regional approach. However, the regional approach is also cognizant of the fact that a blanket approach is not going to work for everyone. So let's just really try and see how best we can model it such that at least country A, country B, and C still benefit from this approach. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's very cool, because obviously, like, different countries would have different abilities to address this on their own.
Exactly.
And it is a regional issue, like you mentioned, because it's so easy to transport it from border to border. So it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a little bit about your personal experience working for that organization for the past whatever, it's been a year and a half. What have been some of the more interesting experience to you personally? Some of the maybe some of the more challenging things that you've seen, or some of the stuff that's made you really, like, excited about the prospect of achieving that goal by 2030.
Yeah. Sure. So I think probably one of the most exciting things that I've seen is how eager countries are actually to address this. I think when you provide people with really an opportunity to do something of this magnitude, they actually do engage. I think the perception from outside is normally just that they're really not trying. But when you really get to the heart of it, it's the effort exists. The people are passionate about what they're doing. But obviously they're just hit by lack of resources in some instances. So we actually did a study tour to Sri Lanka, where we learned that their approach, it was so fascinating. Their approach was so simple, literally. So where we want to throw fancy technology at things, the latest systems of things, they literally were like, we did most of our work in Excel. We were tracking a lot of our work in Excel. We didn't have, a fancy system. Only now we're implementing it, now that we've reached elimination, just so that we can now maintain the status of elimination. So I think that's certainly been very exciting to see. It's just the level of commitment that does exist in countries. And like I've mentioned, some of the challenges that we've come across is obviously just that, the lack of resources. Yes, is certainly one of the biggest things. But I've been excited to see how that's been addressed. So, we try and implement a surveillance monitoring system, but you're met with the fact that there's no infrastructure in a place, like there's no internet. But then somebody comes to you and says, no, you actually don't really need internet. You can still make this work, you can still make your cell phone work without internet and still be able to relay, let's say a case has been detected in X area, but you can still send that out to the regional office and then have them know and alert them of that. So that's definitely been interesting to see. Yeah.
It's very cool. Tell us a bit more about that. Like, how do you keep track of things? This is kind of interesting. So through, like, a simple cell phone, they would call or otherwise report a case somewhere, or is it so is there like a central place in each country that keeps track of this, and then they hear back from different regions around the country, like, on a regular basis? What is that process?
So countries basically, on an individual level, they deploy out community workers, and community workers are literally the foot soldiers. So they go out into the community, do the testing, do the treating, and in cases where, you know, we've detected a positivity, we then follow that up, and then a text message is sent. And in some cases, they have what are called hotlines. So it's not really like where you sit in a call center and, you know, you have like an actual hotline going. It's just a cell phone that maybe is kept at the regional office. The regional office, this is in country, by the way, not our program, in country. And, you know, this is somebody who just receives messages and says, okay, this is what's been detected. This is how many people we tested today. So that continuous line of communication is very, very important, because then at least it lets you know what's happening, right? Like literally it's on time, it's live data that's coming to you. So I personally, like I say, I found that to be it's a simple thing, but a very effective way to make sure that people are on top of things, you know, and then you're better able to deploy a solution, because now we know we've detected a problem here. You know, whether your barometer is that 5 cases constitute an outbreak, you're able to address it as quickly as possible.
That's very
Yeah.
cool, and I like what you said, that it's live data, that you can right away see that there's an issue and where exactly that is, and then concentrate your resources there. It's very cool. I mean, I think that's a cool example of like simple, innovative, you know, technology that could be used in a very effective way in those efforts. Okay, very cool. And so where are you based? Where is your organization based?
Okay, so we are based out of Windhoek, Namibia. And why we're based in Windhoek or in Namibia is because I want to say the champion for this initiative was the former Minister of Health for Namibia, Dr. Richard Nchavi Kamwe, who today is actually the ambassador for the program, for this initiative. So as a courtesy to him, you know, the country ministers who came together said, this is something that you're clearly very passionate about and you can drive far better. So I guess it was just like, okay, let's have the secretariat be based there. And I mean, also this is somebody who himself is a malariologist. So he speaks the language of malaria quite well. So as courtesy to him, the secretariat is then based here.
And do you travel quite a lot in other parts of the region? Other parts of the region?
There's a lot of travel that happens throughout the region, just because you know, you need to be, I want to say, at the heart of it all. You need to be, you know, you can't be having conversations with ministers on your cell phone out of Windhoek in Namibia. No, you need to go have that interpersonal dialogue if you really want to convince them to buy into. And I think this applies across really any profession where you really want to get stakeholders on board, you want buy-in. The best approach is personal. It always is. So a lot of our travel really is really to countries and just to either it's conducting training for entomologists, it's holding meetings, but it's not just to hold a meeting, but really just to you know, to allow and facilitate dialogue. So we bring together everyone into one place and we say, let's discuss this. Let's have open and honest conversation and say what it is and tackle it, you know. So it's busy. It's very busy, especially now. Actually, I should maybe mention this, that right now is the malaria peak season because it's raining. So you'll find a lot of Southern African countries experience their rainfall from October to about March. So this is normally our peak season for malaria. So this is a lot of the time when everyone is out in the field doing studies, collecting the actual mosquitoes, studying them for the vector, understanding movement, coming up and mobilizing teams that should an outbreak happen, we are ready to deploy. You know, so right now we're actually in the peak of things. And we're very fortunate that we have had experiences in the past that required us to come together very quickly, and certainly that was very successful. So having those lessons from then are now being applied so that at least we are better able to address any issues that might come up. So yeah.
That's good to hear. Now, Kelly, you grew up in Botswana?
That's right.
Okay. And growing up, did you ever get sick with malaria, or one of your close family members? Do you have any direct experience with malaria?
Okay. No, just because I grew up in a city, so you find that malaria really in cities is not as common. So I've never really had any sort of direct relationship with it, I would say. And also the time when I was growing up, really the world had really turned its focus on HIV. I think this was at the height of HIV and TB. So we knew that far better than we knew malaria, although malaria was also claiming millions and continues to claim millions of lives. But what's exciting now is that the dialogue has changed, because countries have now are controlling HIV far better. We now understand it far better. And now the conversation is about how do we address malaria? So I think I've come at the right time, basically. I've come at the right time. Yeah.
It's good that there is increased focus on these important efforts. And thank you for the work that you're doing on that. So I think we're coming to the end of our program for the week. So let me just wrap things up over here, and then I'll throw it back at you for some final thoughts. So think about what you want to share with us before we close. But for all of those watching, thank you for joining us for this week's program. We hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to fill out the attendance survey on this page, and also leave us a comment in the discuss section below the video. Ask Kelly any questions that were not discussed on the video, maybe, or leave a comment about something that was interesting to you. So again, thanks for joining us for this week's program, and I'll throw it back at Kelly for some final remarks.
Sure. Thank you so much. This is certainly very exciting to be part of, and thank you so much for inviting me onto this platform to share my experience and what's really happening in the Southern African region. Like I mentioned earlier, that our organization is just a little over 2 years old. So whenever given the opportunity to sell ourselves, we were so excited, and we grab it as quickly as possible, because we want more people to be educated on this matter. Because obviously, the more people know, the more people are able to take proportionate measures. So it's always very exciting. So thank you very much as well for engaging me.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.